Today, we're going to identify causes of the French and Indian War and also analyze the effects of that war on North America. Make sure you take good notes on this presentation. You should have your notes section open to U1, Q2, and include this information there. Can anybody tell me what continent this is? Hopefully you know it's Europe. And this is a composite picture taken from space. So one thing that's interesting about this picture is you can see there are no border lines on this map. You can't see where one country starts and where another one stops. And I think that's interesting to look down on the continent of Europe and see what a satellite sees from space. And obviously a satellite from space can't see borders between countries. Now, looking at this map, can you tell me where France is? Can you tell me where Great Britain is? If you said that this was France, you were right. And if you said that this is Great Britain, you were right. Congratulations. It's important to know that while the British were colonizing the Americas, Great Britain and France were at war with each other. As a matter of fact, they've fought many times over the years, and sometimes they fight for leadership, sometimes they fight for land, sometimes for religion. But for many, many years, Great Britain and France were at war. Now, they're not at war anymore and haven't been for over 100 years, but during the time of colonization, it's important to know that these two countries were battling each other. Now remember, Great Britain at this time is colonizing America. Now if we take a look at this map, you'll see that all of this was under the control of the British, as was this. British, English means the same thing. So all of this is basically an extension of Great Britain. All of this is an extension of France. So not only were Great Britain and France fighting in Europe, but there was also conflict here in America. All this being France, all this being Great Britain. Now, in between these two areas, kind of where this arrow points to, just beyond the Appalachian Mountains, is something called the Ohio River Valley. And there are many, many natural resources in this area. And as you will see, both these countries, Great Britain and France, want the resources in the Ohio Valley. Now, if we zoom in a little bit, this is what the Ohio River Valley looks like. And if you've ever been out to the Appalachians or even a little bit further out west, you'll recognize some of this territory. It's vast areas of wide open space. Very little technology and very little settlements out there. It's basically the picture of wilderness. And this is called the Ohio Valley. And what you're going to have is France wanting this territory and Great Britain also wanting this territory. And we're going to take a look about why they might have both wanted it. So all of this is going to lead to the French and Indian War. That's what it was called in America, and that's what we call it when we study history here. But in Europe, they called it the 7 Years' War. So you're going to want to jot that down, that even though we called it one thing here, in Europe across the sea, they called it a different thing. Why was it called the French and Indian War? Well, not because the French and Indians fought each other, but because the British and Americans were fighting against the French and the Indians. So that can be a little bit confusing, but you're definitely going to want to remember that the French and Indian War was called that because the British and the colonists fought against the French and the Indians. They were the enemy during this time. So I'd like you to draw a little graphic organizer in your notes section. And you don't have to draw the map, and you don't have to draw this map either, but you're going to want to kind of divide your sheet in half. And on this side, you'll take some notes about France, and on this side, you'll take some notes about Great Britain. At this point, you can hit pause on the video and copy this into your notes. And when you're all ready to proceed, then you can hit play on the video and you can go further. So at this point, hit pause and copy this. Okay, now that you have that in your notes, we can take a look. France had small settlements in the New World, the New World being the colonies and America. And the settlements that France had in America were not these giant cities, not these huge colonies. They were small settlements, little villages, little towns. So can you think, who would that have not bothered? Well, if you said the Indians, you'd be right. The Indians, of course, were already here. And the small French settlements didn't really bother the Indians. They didn't mind that the French were settling there. They didn't feel like the French were invading or taking over their territories. On the other hand, Great Britain established large colonies in the New World. And we know that there were 13 large colonies on the Atlantic coast. We've taken a look at the size of some of these colonies. We know Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York, the Carolinas. These are giant areas of land. And the Indians were already there, and they weren't too happy about the British taking over their land. So the French are trusted by the Indians, seen as little threat to their land. The Indians aren't going to be worried that the French are going to take their lands. Whereas by the 1670s, the Indians feel threatened by the British. Uh, the British are known for colonizing, for taking over large areas of land where there are already people living. The Indians are going to be worried about this. They're going to feel threatened by the British. Also, the French wanted to settle the Ohio Valley for the fur trade, as did the British. They also wanted to settle the Ohio Valley for the fur trade. What is the fur trade? Well, the fur trade is, if you remember back to the picture of the Ohio Valley, there were many, many wild animals in that area, and there still are. Raccoons and bears, deer, possibly even some buffalo, and trappers can capture and kill these animals and use their fur to sell. France wanted the fur trade, wanted to be able to collect these furs and sell them. And Great Britain also wanted the fur in this area. So that's going to lead to violent conflict between the French and the British. Once again, here is our map. This is the Ohio Valley. Here are the British colonies, and here are the French. And there's going to be a war. It's called the French and Indian War. When the war is done, the British have won. And this is how the map looks. Everywhere where you see this seeded, all these stripes here, this all used to belong to the French, but now it belongs to the British. You can see the French have backed all the way up to this line. Can anybody guess what that line is? If you said it was the Mississippi River, you'd be correct. So now the British have all this territory in North America. Now, wars are usually ended with a treaty. A treaty is an agreement between the two countries or the two participants in a war. The treaty that ended the French and Indian War was called the Treaty of Paris of 1763. Now, I have 1763 kind of in bold there because not long after this, there's going to be another Treaty of Paris. Paris is a place, for some reason or other, that treaties are signed. The Treaty of Paris of 1783 is the treaty that's going to end the Revolutionary War. This is the Treaty of Paris of 1763, which ended the French and Indian War. So you want to make sure and have that date and know this treaty. The Treaty of Paris said, first, the British gained control over the area from the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the Mississippi River. So if you think about the map we just looked at, you can see that all the area, all the land from the Atlantic Ocean to basically halfway across the country to the Mississippi River is now under British control. Plus Canada. Notice in the map, as a matter of fact, I'll go back so we can look at it. Notice all this. almost all of Canada is now also under the control of the British. Just a gigantic area, almost a continent-sized area, that the British have now gained because of the French and Indian War and stated in the Treaty of Paris. Now, the Spanish played a small role. They helped the French, and since the French lost, the Spanish lose Florida to the British. So Florida also goes to the British. The big impact of the war is that the balance of power has now changed in North America, meaning before the French and Indian War, it was kind of an even match between the British and the French. The French may have actually had more territory in North America, but basically even. Because of the French and Indian War, it is now the British that are the power in North America. Now, wars are expensive. They cost a lot of money. And Great Britain is going to go into debt. How can Great Britain pay for this war they just fought? Can anybody think of an answer? Hit pause and discuss this briefly. How you think Great Britain could pay for the French and Indian War. And when you're done, please hit play and continue. Did anyone come up with the idea of taxes? If you did, you were correct. The British are going to end up taxing the colonists to pay for the French and Indian War. And this is going to lead to the Revolution, which we will get to soon. Now, at this point, hopefully, you have plenty of good notes in your notes section. You can turn the video off and discuss your notes. You can rewind the video to any spot that you'd like and play it again. If you have any questions at all about this video, please ask. Wait for me to notify you so that you can move on to the next station.